Great to be joined today by Dr. Lauren Humby. You're a lecturer at our local university here in Toowoomba, the University of Southern Queensland, a criminology lecturer. And today we're going to have a conversation around the link between porn and crime. So Lauren, is there a link?
Absolutely, there is a link.
Okay, so what type of crime is porn fueling?
Porn fuels a lot of different types of crime. The obvious one is sexual offending. You know, it fuels the pro-offending attitudes. It objectifies women. Women become commodities that just are able to be traded, bought and sold. It leads to rape, you know, sexual offending online. And just a general attitude that violence against women, children is okay.
Let's just come back to this word pro-offending. I've never heard of it actually. It must be a criminology term, is it? But what is a pro-offending attitude?
It's a proclivity towards offending behaviours. So they become normalised, and porn definitely does normalise violence, particularly in relation to sex. So we see there's numerous studies that show that lots of porn, and we're talking around the 90% figures, include some sort of violence. The majority of that is physical, but it also includes verbal aggression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to me there seems like there's a lot of loopholes in the crime or the justice industry.
Yes.
Because you and I, when we do all our research on porn, you think, why aren't these people being arrested? Why aren't the people who are producing especially child abuse sexual material, CCM as we call it, why aren't they being arrested?
So while technology is a wonderful thing and it makes our lives easier in many ways, our criminal justice system is not keeping up very well. We're trying to keep up with legislation, but that takes time to implement. Criminal offending behaviour, new crimes, a lot of people don't think of the types of crimes. Who thinks of hacking a child's game, for example, and gang raping a character in that game, which is what recently happened with the popular child's game Roblox.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's not a crime?
It's very, very hard to police. So while it would be seen as criminal behaviour, an offender and a victim can be anywhere in the world. They can be at opposite sides of the world. So that becomes very difficult, and that's what we call transnational crimes. And so you need the cooperation of other police, the criminal justice system. It makes it really tough. The other thing is that unfortunately the criminal justice system, men built the criminal justice system. That patriarchy is still coming through, and we do see that in sentencing remarks, unfortunately, in a lot of sexual offending cases.
So there's a lot of work to be done. Are they currently trying to get ahead of the game with some of the laws, or is it just deal with things as they come up?
I think it is probably neither. I think that society's attitudes need to change first, because porn fuels this idea that women can simply be objectified and they're just a commodity. They're an object, they're not a being. Their human rights are taken away. And so it's not really something that I think a lot of people see that we need to do anything about. In many cases, men see it as a right. They have a right to dominate women. They have a right to do as they please. And this is fueling, rape culture is already existing in society, but pornography certainly strengthens these ideals. And we see this as a mitigating factor. Porn is a mitigating factor in some crimes. So rape, for example, I'm addicted to porn. It becomes a mental health issue.
I made a comment recently in an interview. I was interviewed by The Chronicle and just made a comment that porn is grooming the next generation of women beaters, and I noticed in some of the comments I got a fair bit of pushback and whatever, but what do you think of that statement? Is porn grooming our next generation of...
Absolutely. So we know that the average age of children when they view porn is 11. Now, children mimic behaviour. They perform in ways, they engage in behaviours that they have witnessed. And so if it's a criminal behaviour, and we look at social learning theories in criminology, if it's a criminal behaviour, children are most likely to engage in that behaviour. It becomes their norm. So they may not, it might not necessarily, they might not know that it is in fact criminal. It simply becomes a norm. It's also dangerous in that it's not just grooming, you know, as you refer to them as women beaters, but it's grooming women. It's grooming them to accept it, to accept that if you're in pain, if you don't want to do something, you just have to submit. That's your role in relationships, in society, and that's very, very damaging.
You know, for all the money our government puts into fighting domestic violence, is it a lost cause when we're not dealing with the issue of pornography? Yes.
Yeah, we have to, it needs to be an all-encompassing fight. And unfortunately, in society, we do what's popular. We do what wins votes. And so, you know, domestic violence is a big thing at the moment, and rightly should be. But, you know, if we're not doing anything about porn, and you talk to domestic violence victims, a lot of those men are addicted to porn.
Let's talk about the issue of sexting. And we know there's a big education on our young people, you know, not to be sending nude pictures, but it's not just young people who do it, it's grown-up adults.
Yes.
And, you know, if we were to walk down the street, down Toowoomba Street tomorrow or today, and a man flashes himself, that's an indecent exposure and he's arrested for it.
Yes.
But for him to do that online, to send a picture to a woman, it's not an offence. Why is that? Why is that another loophole?
Yes, in a way, and this is a prime example where we're not keeping, you know, technology is so advanced and we're not keeping up in relation to the law. So, you know, many women, I think, you know, most who are watching this have likely experienced at least one dick pic in their life. It's very, very prolific online dating, just even into your Instagram accounts, Facebook accounts. And this is a form of indecent exposure. And this is a person that's fully identifiable as well. You know, their face might not be shown, but IP addresses and all sorts of things. Again, we have the transnational nature, so the fact that it might not be somebody in Australia that's sending you this, so that becomes an issue. But again, it comes back to the attitudes against women. You go to your local police station to try and report this incident, you will be hard-pressed to find them take you seriously. And I have heard numerous cases of women trying to report. They feel victimised, they feel traumatised, and the police either just tell them to delete it or laugh it off. And in many cases, they deal with male police. And the front counter, they don't get seen by anybody else.
You said you put a challenge out to your class at a USQ, which majority are women. Many of them receive these pictures to go and report the next one to the police. Has anyone taken that up?
Not yet, but I really hope so, and I encourage anybody to do that, watching this video as well, if you do receive dick pics, you know, because ultimately numbers matter. You know, if we constantly go to the police as women and we say that this is not okay, they will have to start to listen. The media is very powerful, numbers are powerful, and we need to stick together.
What have we got to do to change the law on this? I mean, it's a crime for minors to send that because that's, you know, underage children sending pornography, but what have we got to do with adults?
Change societal attitudes. Yeah. It's about changing those attitudes and that rape culture and those myths, you know, the dominance. And that comes back to porn. It comes back to the fact that that's not okay. Porn is seen as an authority of, you know, this is this is the ideal. This is what you're supposed to be doing. This is what everybody else is doing. And even though everybody else might not be doing that, that's what ends up happening, because everybody thinks that they're either missing out. And we want to be normal. We want to fit in as humans. That's a natural instinct. So, you know, talking to one another, you know, is powerful. You will, the minute that you start having conversations, you will realise there's more women that are not okay with this, more men that are not okay with this. The problem that I have found, and I was surprised myself with that when I started talking about this topic. We are so fearful of being ostracised by society because it's not a popular opinion. We get you know, labelled as, you know, non-feminist. We get labelled as, you know, not sexually liberated, and dismissed. And that, you know, people fear not fitting in, so they're not going to put their hands up. But the more who talk and the more who go, this is actually the norm, and I actually fit in here, and find a voice and find a place.
Absolutely.
That's powerful.
I mean, I don't understand why women aren't outraged, and sometimes, in fact, they're my biggest opposers around City Free from Porn. But you know, when we understand what it's doing to us as a sex, but I mean, it's harming the men too. But what you know, how it's fueling the rape, the incest, abuse, we should be outraged. But
Absolutely.
like you said, I think I find a lot of women have just been so beaten down or had to deal with so much that they're just voiceless.
Yes, and many of them have been traumatised, they're victims, and it's such an ingrained identity that's who they are, that's all they can be. We are just for the taking of men, and it just becomes easier, unfortunately, for some. It's hard to fight. It's hard to have a voice. The constant battle and backlash that you can receive, as I'm sure you well know, is very challenging to deal with. It's emotional, it's draining.
Yeah, no, it is. But for me, it's worth the fight, so
Absolutely.
that's okay.
Absolutely.
Let's have a conversation around virtual rape. Again, another term I've heard you use. Explain virtual rape to us.
So virtual rape, there's two main forms. So there's online in these gaming forums, we are now able to purchase rape fantasies, and it's almost considered a legal tender. You purchase with real money, you purchase with the game's money, this rape fantasy, where you can essentially rape someone in a fantasy. Now, there is another form in which characters are hacked. So users will hack a character, an avatar of another player, which then immobilises their character, and they then rape that character. This has happened in children's games. This has happened in games like Second Life, Grand Theft Auto, but it's becoming more and more prevalent in these games.
So again, you know, do you see a link between people who play these games and then do they go on to perpetrate crimes in real life?
Absolutely. So it becomes, you know, when we do the same thing over and over again, it gets boring. And so we want more excitement. Now, you know, somebody can engage in regular porn, what we might consider, you know, the pizza man coming, you know, that very old school type of porn, but that becomes boring. So then we bring in violence, for example. We might bring in children. And so in the cases of the virtual rape, that then becomes, they can do that so many times that they perhaps bring it into reality. There is also the risk of virtual rape, there's no consequences. We don't, you know, I mean, firstly, you purchase it in some forums, so it's almost considered legal as part of that game. And so then there becomes this idea that they're not going to have consequences in real life. And again, it fuels that notion that women are just for the taking. They're objects. I can dominate them, do what I wish.
But some people now are getting let off in court because they say, oh, I had a porn addiction and it, you know, and they victimise themselves. How is this possible?
It's a tough one, yeah. Like, so porn is now being seen almost as an aspect of mental illness. And so it's being used as a mitigating factor for sexual offending, and we see it quite often. It also fuels, so people who watch porn are actually more likely to side with somebody who has raped another person, because it's seen to be okay.
Really appreciate your insights. It is a bit depressing at times.
Very much so, very much so.
But I'm thankful to have found a person in this field who's willing to speak up, and we've got to push back and say it's not okay. So thank you for doing that. Can I just ask you as we end, why would you like to see a city free from porn?
To be able to not have to, as a woman, go down the street and question, to preempt what could possibly happen. An interesting thing I talked about in class, actually, that I will just bring up. So most of my class is very young. They're in that 18, 19, 20 bracket. Now, as women, we know using weapons as keys, putting our keys between, that's a regular thing. If it's dark, you have your keys ready. That's, you know, and if you ask the men, a lot of the male students look very, very confused. They've never had to think about this in their lifetime. And when we describe it to them, and when all the women in the class say, oh, yep, ringing somebody, you know, that fear that we have on a day-to-day basis as women and children. And men also feel it too, particularly men that don't embody that masculinity that society says that they should have. That would be wonderful.
Yep, and that's why if we can speak out and create a city that's safe for our women, but also for our men, and many of them are caught up in our boys are caught up in an industry that is just predatory, and they're getting sucked into it. So I feel deeply for our young boys
Absolutely,
too.
Absolutely. And they are part of the, you know, it is really hard for them. I recognise that. And we've got to support them. We have to support people in society, you know, by producing porn and by giving them access. That's really unkind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.